Rob, what is your best advice when it comes to actually implementing carbon reduction strategies? We now know our emissions, we know how much we report a year. How do we reduce that?
Well, you've almost answered it in asking the question of, you said we know our emissions, so that's obviously where you start. You look at your baseline emissions, and the first thing is that you look for hotspots. So where do we have an outsized source of emissions? And that's normally business dependent. So maybe, I don't know, you run a logistics company and 95% of your emissions are lorries on the road. So there you've got a really clear strategy there. You're going to look at your lorries and go, right, what are our options for that? So that might be biofuels, that could be electrification. And as you explore all these topics, some are going to work for some businesses and some others. So for example, we've had one client in the US who have had access to grants for electric trucks. So for them, it makes a lot of sense to transition to electric trucks because they don't have that high initial investment. Whereas if you didn't have that grant in place, maybe you'd look to heavy fuel oil and use that as a transition fuel before you then later introduce alternative fuel trucks.
That makes sense. So we calculate our emissions, as we've already talked about. We identify them hotspots. Would you try and focus on scope 1 and scope 2 before scope 3, or would you just dive straight into to reduce everything?
I guess you have your, to use the cliche, low-hanging fruit, and they can happen across the scopes. But if we go back to what scopes 1, 2 and 3 mean, scope 1 is within a company's direct control. So you either own or rent or lease the equipment that you're using. So that is a company's own responsibility. No one else is going to, make you change or do anything there. So they have a slightly higher responsibility to address those scopes 1 and 2. But again, it's what you can actively change. So you look at, is it financially feasible and the rest of it? But yes, companies should look to reduce, really focus on scopes 1 and 2. But yeah, I'd say mixed and possibly dependent on the company. Have you had companies that have had different ones where one of scope 3 has been really easy, but one of scope 1 has been really hard?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's you instantly look at scope 3 because for many companies I've worked with, scope 3 has been well above 90% of our emissions. Yeah. So straight away they think, well, scope 1 and scope 2 is not that much. We can leave that and focus on scope 3. But I agree with you. I think ideally, if you can get rid of, ultimately make zero your scope 1 and scope 2 as soon as possible, and then you can develop them long-term plans and activities to work with suppliers and reduce your scope 3.
Well, like you said earlier, if every business's scopes 1 and 2 were zero, that's it, we're sorted.
Yeah.
It's the scope 3 of other companies as well, so you do have more responsibility to address your own scopes 1 and 2. So how do companies, once they've measured, they've got their pathway, how do they effectively communicate that to their clients or investors?
This is extremely important because the Competition Markets Authority, the CMA, they have the Greens Claim Code. And that is something extremely important to make sure that companies do not put things out there to say that they're environmentally friendly, put all these claims out there which are not correct. We've got to make sure that they're truthful, unambiguous. We've got to make sure that what they are stating is evidenced. It's got everything it needs. So you can't just say that you're a net zero company without even reporting your emissions. You've got to make sure that you put everything out there as much as you can.
Yeah, and I guess where the Competition Markets Authority are looking at your outward branding and marketing, you still have the company reports or the reports that we do for companies that, we display the data right, we say where we got the data from, back again about the data quality score and the emission factors, where they're from. So all about transparency, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Transparency is the key. I always advise companies to have two reports, two GHG reports, greenhouse gas reports. One which is quite long, quite big, and that's available to the public if they want to see it. So this one is the one official to the standard. It's the big one, it's got everything it needs, the full ISO tabling, the different emissions per gas, it's got everything it needs in. But then they can also have a marketable report, which breaks down their emissions, it breaks down the plans, so then people can see, what a company is doing to reduce emissions, what are their goals, what are their targets, and be really clear on where the company is right now. If it's a carbon neutral company right now, is that verified? And make sure that they've got everything they need to make sure that it's correct.
So one example is a product has 80% recycled materials. It's a really clear, unambiguous statement of fact. It's not misleading in any way. Everyone can understand that. But saying this product is environmentally friendly is ambiguous. What does that mean? Does it have recycled materials? Is it made using 100% renewable electricity? I have no idea, but so then that's the reasoning behind the Competition Markets Authority having the Green Claims Code, is that as a consumer or a client of a company, you really know what the product is and what it's about.
That makes sense.
So let's say an organisation is ready to start their decarbonisation journey. Where should they start? What should they do?
Well, first of all, a company needs to understand their business activities. Draw a circle around the business. Give the business activities, understand their emission sources. To do that, you need to understand Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3. So I would honestly advise companies to get some training. The carbon accounting training from Stuart Tunley Environmental is perfect. It'll give you all the requirements, all the data, all the information you need to understand Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 and what data you need to get started. From there, companies can calculate their emissions, they can report to the standards, they can do everything they need to start their carbon reduction journey. At that point, I would advise for them to get it verified by an external consultant, third-party verification. We could also go for official certification from a UCAS accredited business. But the main thing is to be transparent and unambiguous and report everything they need.
Great. So quantify the emissions, report, possibly engage a consultant to verify.
Exactly.